Are you recording?
This has mainly been sound check. We haven't actually started.
But he does sometimes use these intros because there can be some funny stuff that comes out of it.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a dork living in Portland, Oregon who spent too many years listening to podcasts and not doing anything creative. This is my attempt to rectify that, to create and contribute something where I talk to people about their cultural obsessions and try to give some recommendations of my own. Welcome to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Once again, you are listening to Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. I am your host, Jeremy. I am joined by two friends and guests and co-hosts here, and a new guest located way off in the ether. Guest off in the ether, could you please introduce yourself for the viewing audience?
Hi, I'm Ian Williams. I'm a Raleigh, North Carolina-based freelancer, primarily working in the Vice ecosystem these days. I'm also a game designer and a student.
Awesome. Joining me here in the studio, a studio guest, would you please introduce yourself to the viewing audience?
Hi, I'm Nat, a resident Star Wars hot take non-appreciator and co-host, or actually host of Meta Machina, my own podcast.
And
I'm Jacob, and I have slowly given myself over to the machine. Be sure to check me out on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and pretty soon we're going to have a proper website going for Barkles. Check that out at barkles.dog. It's going to be very good.
Jacob is would you describe yourself as just a comic artist or?
Comic writer and artist, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I have very strong opinions about all of this.
Wanted to have Ian on because, dude, Ian, like I said, you have your own particularly interesting, complex back history about both being writing about geek life and nerd shit, and the kind of what has become our kind of just the dominant hegemonic pop cult overlords that kind of like won about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I want to say that your articles were really great. I enjoyed reading them. So
thank you.
Your first comic book article made me want to fight you.
Okay.
But the next one totally flipped it around for me. So good job on that.
Okay.
What was the first one that made you want to fight him?
The stuff about comic books and how they're properties that are controlled by corporations. But basically every issue I had with that was addressed really well in the next article, where you got into things like fan fiction and stuff like that. So
yeah, I softened my stance. Those articles were written, I think, like 4 years apart, maybe a little bit more. So hopefully we never calcify so much that we never quite stop changing and altering our minds about things a little bit.
I respect that.
Or if we do, we get at least get hired by the Atlantic before that happens or something.
Right.
I guess the question is and we don't really do straight interviews. It's more of just loose conversation here. Yeah. How do things look as, what is your take on kind of what is become the nerd shit industrial complex that started, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and all of a sudden just kind of decided to overtake everything?
Well, I was actually speaking to Gavin Mueller about this, who is, of course, an academic, and he actually wrote a rebuttal, Jacob, you'll be happy to know, in Jacobin to my very first article on geek culture there. But as it turns out, Gavin and I really hit it off, in online terms. We have, I think, a fair amount of mutual respect, and I find him a very interesting thinker about media studies and stuff like that. But we were talking about the idea of nostalgia, because he was talking about Ready Player One, which I'll go ahead and say I have not seen, but I also think I have a pretty good handle on what led to its creation and where it ended up being.
Yeah, Reddit did not see it.
Yeah, and so the thing about nostalgia at this point is that I think it's kind of hard to talk about the all-encompassing beast that geek culture has become, because it's nostalgia-based. And when we talk about that, it's important to be very, very clear about what we're talking about. It's nostalgia for a very specific slice of time at a very specific slice of corporatized culture, which was, of course, like 1980s toys and TV and things like that. But what's weird about that nostalgia is that, and I'm not sure how old y'all are. I'm 40, so I've kind of like gotten to see like that little slice of the 70s before it became the 80s, because decades don't just go like 0 to 9, right? Like they linger and shift, and some decades are longer than others. I'm
about a year older than you are.
All right, well there you go. Okay, so this should be like eminently familiar, since you got to live through the 90s and the aughts, like as an adult and stuff like that.
I remember the comic collector boom era, for example.
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And but one of the things that you'll notice if you look at that is that the 70s, there was like this little spurt of 70s nostalgia in the 90s, like the mid 90s. Like there were like bell bottoms threatened to come back.
I was wearing bell bottoms at the time.
Yeah, and you would see, like a paisley dress or something like that, and it lasted like 2 years. And I'm going to skip the 80s for a second, but there was like a little burst of like 90s nostalgia, and you kind of see it in like vaporwave, and C-punk and some of the computer nostalgia, but that's kind of like a subsumed secondary thing. And like 2000s nostalgia just basically doesn't exist, right?
We can't remember that. We don't want to remember that time.
Right, exactly. But like 80s nostalgia, I got curious when I was talking about Gavin about this. 80s nostalgia. Do you know when the first episode of I Love the 80s was? It was in 1998.
Yeah, I was going to say like 96 or so, but
correction. It was 2002.
Yeah, that was
okay. So like 98 was, I think, the American one, and I think that was actually based on a British show that came like a year before that.
Sounds about right.
Oh, hi. Come on in. I want to show you something I think you're going to enjoy. The 80s. You know, the film and the fashion, the food, the music, of course. Nearly all the things that you guys had so much fun with back when, back in the days we all looked a little younger than we do right now. So, this week, it's 1980. An unforgettable year for a guy who looked just like me.
And I remember that there were like 80s, trying to do not hair metal, but kind of like the early synth stuff, and synth pop, particularly overseas. But taken together, what that means is that we've had almost 20 years of 80s nostalgia, where every other form of nostalgia has lasted for like 4, 5, 6 years, right? And the net effect of that is that we are no longer nostalgic for the 80s, right? Because really people should not be nostalgic for the 80s, because everybody who remembers the 80s as even like a teenager is in their 40s or pushing 50, we're now nostalgic for the nostalgia about the 80s, right? And that is an incredibly strange place to be, because what that means is when your entire culture is no longer about even nostalgia for a real time, but nostalgia for a manufactured nostalgia for a real time, essentially what we're going to do is from now until the heat death of the sun, we're going to keep creating the 80s, right, in our popular culture.
Welcome to the Cafe 80s, where it's always morning in America, even in the afternoon.
There's no way out. We're trapped in the cycle, because all we know is nostalgia, and the nostalgia cycle has now become nostalgic for itself. And I think that that's really the trap that geek culture is in, right? Because and I think that goes a long way towards explaining why it's like, oh, well, it's time to recreate this show, right? Like how many, that is not a novel observation, by the way, the idea that like we just remake things over and over and again. But I don't know if we've really examined why that is, because it's just too simple to be like, well, people are lazy. And I don't think that's exactly it. I think there's more going on there.
It feels like it's like there is no innovation at this point in terms of some of the stuff. Like, I think the resurgence of cyberpunk recently has been really interesting to me because of that fact. Like, we don't have a we don't have alternate visions of the future to glom onto, so we continue to recycle these ideas. You know, looking at something in comparison like Star Trek, where you tried to push the limits on possibility and interesting things, but you know, we're definitely pushing back into this idea that like we have to be. I mean, the dystopia thing is kind of ending, but still, cyberpunk is a form of dystopia, and we continue to pull these into our sci-fi all the time. I think it's just a reflection of our culture at large.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think who it was that was talking about it. I think it was a few people, and I think that Austin Walker at Waypoint was one of them who was saying that an awful lot of cyberpunk that he sees is still in this like solitary hero, and it kind of ends up being hopeless. And
it's very nihilistic.
He really wanted to see a cyberpunk that was a little more hopeful.
Same.
Right. You know, that recognized the power of the collective, because one person's not going to take down a corporation if, you know, they jack in and steal their data or something like that.
Exactly. Put the punk back in cyberpunk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You know, less individualistic, a little bit more hopeful that somebody could, you know, that a group of people could change things. But also, like, you know, depending on my mood, I don't feel particularly hopeful.
I don't think anybody does.
And I'm not, and I'm not entirely certain that, you know, if cyberpunk reflects pessimism, and we keep returning to that well, then there's probably a reason for that.
I think, Jacob, you have something to say? You had something to add?
Well, I was going to put this into a interesting historical context, which is that this retro fixation thing isn't necessarily that new. I mean, America was obsessed with cowboys long after all the cowboys were dead, and we were fantasizing about a version of cowboys that was completely inaccurate to the reality of the situation.
What's your name, dude?
Eastwood. Clint Eastwood.
What kind of stupid name is that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, my favorite nostalgic movement is that, and it's a weird one, is that in the like early 70s with like Lawrence Welk and stuff like that, you had this weird nostalgia for the gay 80s, you know, the 1890s, and 1880s.
Truly.
And there was this one Twilight Zone episode where, you know, it's like mid 60s, and the guy goes to, I can't remember which one it is, but he hops on a train.
Oh,
Willoughby, the stop is Willoughby. Willoughby, the stop is Willoughby. Willoughby, sir.
Willoughby?
Yes, sir. Willoughby.
That's right. And where the fuck does he end up? Right? Like he ends up in like the 1890s. Like, what a weird. So like by the 70s, like nobody was even alive who remembered it. But you had like Lawrence Welk doing all this stuff where people were dressed up and you know, turn of the century garb and singing songs, and so I get that.
I was going to say there was a similar movie about the same time of like this weird kind of like 20s retro that popped up in the early 70s too. You know, going from everything from like The Sting to Paper Moon to.
I think it's hilarious and great is that they made so many of those movies that were books at the time. Like all the H.G. Wells stuff came out in the 70s. Was redone in the 70s in that vein, which is it's just great to watch, especially the MST3K versions.
But let me address that cowboy thing though for a second. So one immediate difference is that cowboys are
cool.
You know, they are kind of cool. But cowboys and the 1920s and the 1890s relied on kind of a shared cultural memory, accurate or not. Whereas the 1980s nostalgia is nostalgia for a specific form of entertainment.
Yeah.
That is wholly, you know, corporatized. You know, we're not nostalgic for. I mean, some of us are, but there's not like a mass nostalgia for. You know, minor threat shows.
So we're nostalgic for the media itself that was occurring in that time, not the actual time, which makes sense.
Although I will say I have been it has been nice to see that, like post-hardcore bands are still a thing. But the comment about that I always thought about, one of the reasons why especially like 80s cyberpunk came back, aside from the fact that it was a really neat aesthetic, and I remember I was into that shit when I was 12 years old in 1988, so at least I was definitely exposed to some of the paperbacks. But I think there's almost like an ironic thing about with 80s cyberpunk is that enough time has gone by that it's like we are now living in the dystopic future with like gear that's good, and it turns out everything is not. Everything is just dumb.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more. I can't say that I'm like incredibly well versed in cyberpunk fiction, or really any fiction, because I'm just like a nonfiction guy. Like I like reading theory and politics and history, and I've always been like that. In some ways, I'm a complete Philistine. But it never really. What's that?
I said, God forbid we had Philistines on this show.
Yeah, but it always struck me that like I wanted kind of like cyberpunk's Camus. That it's not that the absurd was like absent in cyberpunk.
No, I heavily relied on it.
Yeah, I wanted something that was like a purely like absurdist work that recognized both the futility and the necessity of doing it. And maybe somebody wrote that, right? Like I'm not saying that.
I don't know.
He didn't.
Yeah, there were a lot of Shadowrun novels, so
yeah, you can definitely. Yeah,
the great unplayable but awesome game.
Oh, and we kind of do live in the corporate nation states. I mean, so.
Right, and
it's a little close.
And like, yeah, well, and like Jacob said, like it's stupid, right? Like I never imagined the end of even the sham of America's democracy to look quite as dumb as this. With dudes in red trucker hats and quite this naked looting, and it's wild.
Yeah, and like not even like Garth Ennis or Alan Moore or any other kind of like English 80s or 90s comic artists trying to be satirical about America would come up with this particular flavor.
No, they couldn't. They didn't even dream this, which is amazing, because it's like, wow, the future really is just as dumb.
I will say that's one thing. You mentioned Austin Walker earlier. One thing that's a long-time subscription to Giant Bomb, both watching the vids and also listening to the podcast from, Christ, like what, 2010, 2011 on, was especially thanks to the memory of one Ryan Davis, was my own a more personal appreciation of the difference between dumb and stupid, and how in certain circumstances, especially with any video games in particular, but any form of entertainment, that dumb could be a massively enjoyable thing. And it's one of the things I always liked about like Giant Bomb Forever, like the kind of almost kind of spread away point, especially their live things, is an enjoyment of God, this is real. As Jeff Gerstmann would always say, this is real fucking dumb, and it's great.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't do a ton of stuff with video games anymore, and certainly not a lot of video game crit. But sometimes I would get people who kind of expected me because I'm anti-corporate and I'm pro-union, and I'm an outspoken leftist.
Right.
They kind of expected me to maybe enjoy smaller, like rebellious art games or indie games, and I'd always tell them I really like stupid, or not stupid, but what you said, dumb,
just dumb
video games. I do. I have incredibly staid tastes in video games. I want to shoot people. I want the game to be loud. I really like strategy games, particularly about World War II, where I'm just moving little things around, like in like the middle-aged dad that I am, and admiring my handiwork at encircling the Germans at Kursk or wherever. That's my shit, right? Like, and I think that's I know that has bummed out a couple people, where I'm just like, well, I mean, I could do that, but also Vermintide 2 came out, and I also am not done leveling up in Battlefield, and there's Elder Scrolls for me to play. So,
how hyped are you about the new God of War?
I don't have a console. I'm not a console gamer.
Oh,
so
all right.
Don't have it, won't have it, and I've never played a God of War. So,
it's got a dad protagonist. I would think you'd be interested.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Like, but I really got my dad protagonist in Witcher 3.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like,
for sure,
that's
the best dad.
That's like, I got the good ending, and that was one of, and I have a daughter, right?
Aww.
And I don't want to do the thing where like, oh, I have a daughter, so I understand women and feminism now, because I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that I have a daughter who is adventurous, and I got the good ending with Geralt and Ciri,
nice.
like going off into the sunset.
For the cockatrice. And we've a new contract. It won't pay much, but I think it worth the toil.
You've been busy. It's yours.
A witch's sword. Swallow. Ooh. Beautiful. May I?
Not here. You'll have ample opportunity soon enough, Witcher.
Let's try it out then.
And like, I totally cried. I was just like, oh yeah, that's it right there.
Ciri's a good protagonist. I mean, a good like example, a role model to give your daughter. Actually, I think she's a good one. I like her a lot.
Yeah, and
yeah.
It was just the pride. The pride you can take in your daughter of like teaching her how to use a sword and how to just you cut a motherfucker. So
yep,
that's right. Yeah, I really hope that they do a Witcher 4 and that it is Ciri's story.
Agreed.
And I hope that just like Geralt, she fucks and kills her way and like through the entire thing.
Yes.
Right. Like just make her like a full equal and just fucking do it. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that write Ciri fan fiction, so I have been exposed to a lot of the dreams of women for that protagonist. So
yeah, well, I'm sincerely that would just be the best fucking game.
They have their cyberpunk game to go through first.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
yeah, I have some fairly high hopes for that. And what's weird is that Mike Pondsmith, who wrote the Cyberpunk RPG, there was some kind of like exchange deal where he's writing a Witcher role-playing game, like pen and paper.
Oh,
cool.
Nice.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the progress seems to be a little bit slow. He's very much kind of like old school, or seems to be kind of like a solitary with some secondary game designers around him. I don't exactly know, and very, very old school in design outlook. So it's liable to not be, it'd be like a little too crunchy and a little too, carrying around like a 500-page tome or some shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore already in the franchise, and then Cyberpunk itself. I've played Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop.
Right.
And
Grognardy.
It's insane. So yeah, I can see them like holding up for 10 years before they could ever come out with it.
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else, but like I literally cannot play games like that anymore.
You can't play tabletops or just
no tabletop.
Yeah.
I just had to. I've got a group. Most of the guys are in Funcom, who did like Age of Conan and Anarchy Online
awesome.
and stuff like that. And
Age of Conan actually. So
yeah, man, that game.
I know. That's its own podcast.
Yeah,
yeah.
I deliberately never really got into it. I figured even when MMOs were really like taking off like years ago, I figured the only thing that would ever get me to play an MMO would be like, I think I tried the very first Lego one, it was either going to be Lego or Fallout, and they never did. And they'll, who knows if they'll ever come up with a Fallout one.
I'd be on that shit like immediately.
Not if Bethesda writes it.
That's true.
But anyway.
No, but like what I was going to say was, and it's rolling, so you can incorporate this or not. Like it's whatever. But like what I was saying was that even D&D 5th edition, which I really get, and it's the most lightweight version of Dungeons and Dragons besides like basic D&D, I just don't have the time or the mental bandwidth to keep up with all the rules. And like a few weeks ago, like I was just getting ready to do Tomb of Annihilation, their new campaign. I even bought like the vinyl map for it, which is really nice. So we've gone already from like a $40 outlay or $50 to like pushing 100. And I just like I looked at my group and I was like, guys, listen, like you're all dads, you all have real jobs. I'm all of that, and I have school. We keep calling out and not able to meet, and of course you know how it is with like a role-playing game. It was like you go 2 weeks in a row without meeting, you may as well kill it because you're not going to pick it back up. And I was like, what I really want to do is I want to go get a dungeon crawl board game because they make a lot of those now. And I want to get what I enjoy out of D&D, which is the dungeon crawl portion, and let's just do that because it takes zero prep work on anyone's part. If somebody has to fucking miss or something like that, then it's not a big deal. We can keep going. Mm-hmm. If 2 of the 4 players have to miss, who gives a fuck? We just cancel and then we pick up because there's no real story to worry about, right? And like characterizations and all of that. And that was the right decision. Like, it's really good. Like, we picked up Warhammer Quest. I'm gonna grab Gloom Hollow at some point over the summer, and like we're just gonna do that now. We do plenty of Apocalypse World style games and stuff like that, but that's not really like my group's wheelhouse. Like, they want to min-max and fight monsters and all that stuff. And I'm happy to indulge them, but I don't know if I'm happy to indulge them in role-playing games. If that makes sense. I was saying,
why not just like short circuit it and like have them play Munchkin?
Because I want a little something more than that. Although there are weeks that we do board games. But my brother said I was over at his place playing Warhammer, and I said, I looked at him and we were having like so much fun playing Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and we had our friend, a third person, our friend Scott, with us, and they were teaming up against me. And I looked at him and I said, God, this is so much fun. And he said something which was very real. He said the average like wargaming or miniature games or board gaming session is better than the average role-playing game session, but the best role-playing game session is better than anything you'll ever do with one of those like more tactile games with boards and pieces and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, that's absolutely true.
I would agree. So what game are you playing? I'm sorry, I came in a little late.
Right now we're playing Warhammer Quest, Shadows over Hammerhall, which is their kind of it's not really procedurally generated, although the first box of the new Warhammer Quest was. Like, it's a dungeon crawl board game, set in the Warhammer universe. I'm going to get Gloom Hollow at some point, and I might do Descent, although I hear Descent takes a really long time to play.
I have greatly. I used to be much more, going out to like weekly or monthly board game nights, but this was, I think, only a couple of years after I'd moved to Portland, when there was a massive like Euro game explosion.
Everybody wanted to play Ticket to Ride.
Right. Hey, I have Ticket to Ride Markland edition. It's still my favorite.
Yep.
But it's been just years since that.
Yeah, they still actually put on a lot of those events in Portland. I don't know about where you're from, Ian, if they have that kind of culture, but like there's board game culture is pretty big here, which is kind of nice because you can meet a lot of people that love to play board games. But I'm personally in the D&D thing where it's like I would rather just have a theater of the mind experience than push things around on a map.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, but I also am incredibly picky about what I want from a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And that leads to me being very, very picky about who I play with. I'm only energized if I get a certain experience, right?
Yeah.
And just in case a member of my group does listen to this podcast, this does not mean that I have had a bad time role-playing with you, but I am saying that, like, the experience is such that most times when I do role-playing games, I'd rather do the surefire thing of getting the board game out, or, the miniatures game and stuff like that. And, like, honestly, like, I gotta say that as a continuous hobby, as in what I put the most amount of my brain space into in free time, like, it really is miniatures wargaming, even though I gave it up for like 14 years.
That's cool that you were able to get back into it, though, and it's it's still there and it's still going strong, in my opinion. I mean, Warhammer lore is amazing, but it's like a bleak black box to somebody that's outside of it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How was your weekend of quote unquote playing Warhammer until you puked?
Oh, it's fucking awesome. It's like, it was so good. Yeah, like generally speaking, is like I go to my brother's place in Greensboro, which is about an hour west of Raleigh, and pretty close to where I grew up. And he has more space than I do, and most of our wargaming circle is like over there. And I usually go up on like a Friday, and because I don't have class on Friday, so I just fuck off out of here, and I don't, like, it gives me like extra time. So, like, we'll just drink or whatever on like Friday night, and we'll get up on Saturday, and our friends will come over, and we'll just fucking play all day. And we'll have like campaigns, and we've got like a group of, including us, like 4. So we'll have like 2 tables going at once. So, like, if we're doing like a map-based campaign where like your little armies fight each other over territory or what the fuck ever it is we do, we'll have like 2 tables, and then it'll be like, okay, that took 2 hours, and it's only 3:30. We can go until at least 10, so let's switch tables and people, and and like, I don't smoke anymore, but I smoke over there, so like we'll have like, we'll set up a table actually outside on the porch.
Nice.
And just like smoke cigarettes and like drink and just fucking play. Like, it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just the best thing.
I really feel like that's the best experience you can have, is having that weekend away with the games. We've done that with D&D before, and it's been exceptional.
Oh yeah, I've got to fuck off out of town like once a month. Like, I go up the first weekend of every month. And it's absolutely no disrespect to my friends or Raleigh, which is a city I love, or my family who I love, or anything like that. But it's like, I just have to go be in a different world, and I'm very, very close to my brother. So we've been best friends for most of our lives. In addition to being brothers, I know that like most brothers don't get along, and like I'll be over there sometimes, and he is a teacher who is very involved at his school, so he'll host like social functions at his place and stuff. Mm-hmm. And people will come over, and I'll be there, and he'll say, "Oh, hey, this is my brother." And every like third person, they'll give me a look like, "You hang out with your brother," So
it's good to be close to your family, though. It's just a blessing, really.
Yeah, but like it very definitely is. Like, family's hugely important, but also that's the kind of thing that makes me realize that most, or at least a significant minority of people, are not close to their family or their siblings.
Yeah, that is especially like nowadays, where it's for plenty of folks, it's like mobility is so easy that, for example, like all my most of my family is 3 time zones east of here. And I just moved out to Portland just because I wanted a city that was bigger than a bigger version of Ann Arbor, and unfortunately it was this far away. But
yeah, I couldn't do that. I'll be honest with you, like not just the fact that we can be so mobile so much as it is the expectation that you're mobile really, really freaks me out. Particularly kind of like flirting with getting my doctorate, maybe going into academia, and I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, "No, you have to go way far away if you're going to get a job as a professor from where you get your doctorate." I kind of say, "Well, I'm not really willing to do that, so maybe I'll adjunct you know, like
what's the old? I can't remember who said it. It was maybe if it was like out of a Kundera book or something. But it's like no one is an expert in their own backyard. As if like everybody is like, we knew you before you were you, pal. So don't be putting on airs around here. So
yeah, I just for just aside from all of that, it's just I like my family and I like where I live. I like North Carolina.
That's a blessing, to be honest with you, too. Like, I mean, most people are like, I can't take it. But if you have it, keep it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely know how rare and lucky that is. But, I also think it's a little bit fucked up that people are just like, oh, well, I, as a corporate, boss or whatever, I need you to move halfway across the country. Mm-hmm. And that's just kind of to be expected.
Yeah, it's
that
a cultural
kind of freaks me out a little bit because I just, that's just not where my head's ever been.
Yep, landless serf is sent wherever. Oh, hello, cat.
Right, that's right.
Speaking of just close relations with my brother helped me get back into pro wrestling. It was like a rough segue. Like way back, I think back during back during the Attitude Era. Because we, as an '80s kid growing up, that was, we got into WWF right before WrestleMania 2, and so we were like big. And my dad, who was his great grandma Cossett, would always take my dad to the matches in the Flint IMA, every Saturday, and the joke is that. Yeah, all the workers knew not to go over to that corner of the crowd, as there's the old lady there who would just say it was still real to her, damn it, and she would deliberately bring her umbrella with her to the matches, and not really hide her feelings about the heels. But one of the things that I didn't want to make, because you're currently covering the Pro Wrestling Beat for Vice.
Yeah, I have a weekly column which goes up on Tuesday. It's called Bruiseday, in a bit of clever wordplay.
I love it.
As Vice is known for, yes, certainly.
I don't get it.
It's because Tuesday's when the beer comes out.
Oh.
Yeah, that's true. But no, like it was just wild to me. And I've been doing this for 3 years, 2 years, something like 3 years, I think. It was when Dusty Rhodes died, because Dusty died. Yeah, that was 2015, so almost 3 years. I was just I found myself way sadder than I thought I was going to be.
Really?
When Dusty died, and I served as editor on Nathan Palletta's Worldwide Wrestling role-playing game, which is an Apocalypse World hack. It's really, really good, and everybody should go buy it if you're at all interested in role-playing games, indie role-playing games, or pro wrestling, or all three. I was the editor on that, but he also asked me to write an essay in the back, because he had a few people write essays. Aubrey Sitterson, I know, wrote one. A few other people who I can't recall off the top of my head. And I wrote about Dusty Rhodes as this working class hero in the South, because he really, really was.
Yep.
Here's the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty, your fans welcome you back, man.
First of all, I would like to thank the many, many fans throughout this country that wrote cards and letters to Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, while I was down. Secondly, I want to thank Jim Crockett Promotions for waiting and taking the time, because I know how important it was. Starcade 85, it is to the wrestling fans, it is to Jim Crockett Promotions. And Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, with that weight, got what I wanted.
I remember, and the essay kind of like centered on this. I had this working class friend. His mom worked in a factory. I grew up in Lexington, North Carolina, which is a factory town, right? It's like in the 80s, it was textiles and furniture plants. That's where you worked. She worked at a fiberglass plant, putting together like fiberglass.
No,
I don't know.
Oh wow,
that's got to be in the fiberglass plant in like the South. That's got to be rough for the lungs, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, no, I like she died young. not like in her 40s or anything like that, but I know that she died maybe 10 years ago, which would place her around 60. It's probably, I didn't, I don't really keep up with him anymore, so I didn't ask and I didn't pry. But and we were watching. Ricky and I were like my friend Ricky and I were obsessed with wrestling, and I just remember watching it and her taking an interest in it partly because of Dusty Rhodes. And anyway, I was sad, and I said, hey, you know what? Can I put? I got in touch with Nathan, and I said, I know that it's in your book and everything like that, and people have to buy the book to read it. But do you mind if I put that on my blog? And he said, that's fine. And David Roth, who is at Deadspin now, but was at was an editor at Vice Sports at the time. He saw it because I tweeted it out. I said, "This is, I'm sad. This is what I wrote about Dusty, a year ago." And he says, "Do you want to eulogize Dusty in Vice Sports?" And I was like, "Holy fuck, yes!" I'd love that. And it took off. It wasn't particularly wrong, but it was heartfelt. Like, I wrote about what Dusty meant to me. And very specifically, I think, I was born in Indiana, but I moved to North Carolina when I was 2. I am Southern, even if my family is all from like New York City and Minnesota. The elder members of my family.
And of course there's no history of pro wrestling in either New York City or Minnesota Minnesota. Yeah.
But like Dusty and pro wrestling in general, but Dusty specifically and Flair are such a specifically Southern phenomenon for me.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right?
Ric Flair, the world's heavyweight champion. I don't have to say a lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair. No respect, no honor. There is no honor among thieves in the first place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work and got 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they tell them go home. And hard times are when a man has worked at a job 30 years. 30 years. They give him a watch, kick him in the butt, and say, hey, a computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard time.
Ric Flair. Ric Flair, was he Charlotte or where did he?
Charlotte.
Okay,
all those guys were Charlotte, right? Like we would. You guys were listening to, you're watching Hogan and Andre and all that shit, and I remember even being a kid being like, fuck that cartoony shit, because Ric Flair bleeds and Dusty Rhodes has his leg broken. Like, that shit's real, you know.
Yet I still remember when both of them came over and like, God, Dusty was like 88, I think, or 89, and
that sounds about right. Yeah, in polka dots.
American dream. He's just a common man, working hard with his hands.
And Flair, I think it was like 91 or 92. I think it was 92.
Okay,
that seems right to me because he'd had a dispute. But I just wrote what I felt, right, which was that Dusty Rhodes represented a very specific populist, left-leaning Southern form of identity that we don't really get to see, because we're all just hicks down here, and we're all racist, and all that shit, and we all vote Republican, and that's just not true. Like it's partly true, but it's more complicated than that, and it went well. Like, suddenly I'm sitting here, and I'd had a certain amount of success with writing, but Mick Foley's like retweeting me and like praising it, and yeah, that was just weird. So they invited me to keep writing, and then I got a column, and now I write about wrestling every week, which is not really what I expected I'd ever be doing, but it's what I do. So
I'm not somebody who really keeps up with wrestling at all, but I was wondering, is there a union?
Funny you ask.
God, no. They are even at WWE, which is obviously the biggest pro wrestling promotion in the world, they are classified as independent contractors. WWE, depending on where you are, pays really, really well, but you don't get benefits, and the travel's brutal.
Yep.
It's you're able to be fired at a whim, but also you are always expected to stay for the duration of your contract if they decide they lose interest in you or there's a dispute or something like that. So it's rough, which is not, again, to say that there aren't people who make out really, really well at it. But it's fucked. Dan O'Sullivan in Jacobin wrote, obviously, what was I think one of the definitive pieces on pro wrestlers as workers, which is worth reading if you've not, and it goes into all of that about how wrestling promoters are some of the sleaziest people that American business has ever seen, and the workers are just ruthlessly exploited and always have been. So yeah, it's rough, and I don't see a union coming. I think there's too many people willing to cut their coworkers' throats to do it.
If not literally, yeah. The story of why they don't, which actually does come to think, it does connect up to New York websites, publishing websites, as it were. It was just the weirdest thing how you have the guy who would later go on to be just a libertarian governor of a state was the guy, was it pushing the hardest to for wrestlers to be unionized.
Yeah, like Jesse Ventura wanted to unionize, and the story is that Hogan backstabbed him and ratted him out to Vince McMahon, and that's why Jesse Ventura got fired by WWF at the time, and he went to WCW for a little while and was an announcer, and then he went on to become mayor of whatever town it was, and then he went on to become governor of Minnesota. But a word for Jesse Ventura, because he's one of those people who claim to be libertarian. I don't know how libertarian he ever was. I think that libertarian for some people, particularly boomers, has become kind of a catch-all for something that's not Democrat or Republican.
Socially liberal, usually, right? I mean,
what's that?
Socially liberal, usually.
Yeah, certainly. But if he was unionizing, he's hardly an Ayn Rand libertarian in the way that Kane is or something like that.
Oh God, he's I forgot he's still running for office, isn't he?
Yeah, he is mayor of whatever town it is in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I have an old friend. I don't. We had a falling out, and I don't keep in touch with him, but I know that he ran for North Carolina House of Representatives as a libertarian, and he's not libertarian at all.
Was it just a thing of just not Republican or not Democrat, but it's kind of that weird mix of sort of Republican, but only still likes to smoke pot and have prostitutes or something, or
he did like to smoke pot, although I don't none of the other stuff. But it was because in North Carolina, at least at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, if you wanted to run as an independent, you couldn't and get on the ballot. You had to register to run as a libertarian. So you had a bunch of people who registered as libertarians who were socialists or centrists or
whatever,
centrists or something like that. So that's kind of one of those things where it just serves as a stand-in. Jesse Ventura is weird, but I don't know how libertarian he actually was.
Yeah, one of the greatest on part of one of the greatest play-by-play and color commentary teams ever.
Also, no one's gotten closer to the truth about the JFK assassination.
That's true. Yeah.
But
I wish I could. I wish I could do James Adomian's impression of him.
The Howard Stern Show.
Jesse, it is so great to see you.
Yeah, well, it's good to be back. I've been waiting in Mexico for your phone call.
You know, you have so many theories and thoughts. You're just a fascinating man, and you were governor, and you were a wrestler.
Well, take a pick. Is it a theory or a thought?
Right.
What am I thinking it, or is it been, is it scientifically provable or disprovable?
Answer the question once and for all. Are you running governor for president? What are you doing?
Look, I don't know if I'm running for president. I might just be running for exercise. Isn't that enough, Howard?
Right.
I'm running 4 miles an hour.
When you talk about conspiracy theories, do you believe Canada is behind 9/11?
Let me lay out my theory on 9/11 for you, because we've danced around it a few times on the show, Howard.
Right.
No, this is after I've read the documents.
Right.
Have you read the documents?
I have not, but you are an avid reader.
I subscribe
and
to...
you were a Navy SEAL.
I was a Navy SEAL. I was an Intercontinental Tag Team Champion. Have some respect.
Okay, so
I've hunted predators in Guatemala, Howard.
How do you know what happened on 9/11?
Look, well, they were...
Robin,
Predator was
leave him alone.
Robin, I'll have you know, Predator was a documentary. And we lost creative control. That's why my character had his chest blown out, because I was going to expose it.
So you're saying that was a real thing?
Yep, it goes all the way to the top. Iran-Contra, that's what that was all about.
9/11, though. Explain once
Let's
and for all
talk
your
it.
theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've looked at the facts. I've had some time in Mexico. I sit in the waves on my surfboard.
Right.
And I think I piece it together, and I have documents I bring out with me into the surf, and some of them get wet and pulp.
Right.
And they float away. By the way, I subscribe to Documents Monthly.
Right.
It's a magazine. They send documents to you in a manila folder, and then there's a children's magazine that comes with it, Suspicions for Children.
Because that's the shit right there. But I can't. I'm not that good.
Yeah, like Adomian will actually say, "Well, listen, gorilla," and I always really enjoy that. And but that's the thing is, like, you talk about how wrestling promoters can be like scum of the earth. It's kind of, it's more than, not even like a little irony about how like our current president was, massively affiliated with WWF from like WrestleMania 4 onward. And I always heard that it was kind of like, I think both like he and Vince, I think, felt a kinship because they were both like, son, kind of like the really, emotionally abused sons of extremely like rich and powerful men having to kind of grow up in that shadow and prove themselves in like 80s New York. And now, Vince's wife is on the goddamn cabinet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I said that I was on a panel last November at a conference, and it was about Trump and pro wrestling, and I said that we don't know a lot about Vince McMahon, right? It's kind of this a lot of his life is just lore. He's almost this final folkloric character, like, a fucked up rich Paul Bunyan or something like that, where he's simultaneously extremely public and extremely private, so we don't really understand him, and he's weird too. Like, that's all we really know about him. But what I said was that I think he's a lot like Trump, and we can learn a lot about what Vince is like by learning what Trump is like, and simultaneously we can figure out how Trump might behave by watching the way that Vince McMahon behaves, particularly when it comes to the way that Vince just very obviously broadcasts his neuroses through pro wrestling on television. Mm-hmm. And I maintain that, like whoever was talking to, that bit about how they're just both very obviously emotionally damaged but very rich people, grappling with what it was like to deal with these larger than life fathers. Like, that seems extremely apt to me. I know we're not supposed to psychoanalyze, and we're all supposed to do materialist analysis now and everything like that, but
I'm all about the psychology analysis, because I think it reduces them down to human beings, which is what they are, and the personalities they portray are caricatures of themselves, but at the same token they kind of learn from the best. Like wrestling is method acting, right? Like they really are the best method actors. That Ric Flair documentary, really, I think that ESPN did.
Is that a 30 for 30 or?
Yeah, it was a 30 for 30. It was really good. Somewhat sanitized in the sense that they're just anything that WWE touches is just not going to be tell-all. Like it's just not. Just put that expectation aside.
So the incident with like him and Roddy Piper with the just completely was it the story? I think Roddy Piper even talked about it in his bio about. Like they went to some match in like Jamaica or something, and Roddy Piper got paid he was paid with a sugar bowl. Only the sugar bowl was not filled with sugar, and like at some point,
yeah,
just
it's cocaine, whatever. Yeah. Well, so I've not read Piper's biography, but the Ric Flair documentary did a really good job of. It was the other people that were talking, not Ric Flair, and they were saying there's this story that Jim Ross told about how. They were in Kansas, like in the middle of nowhere.
You know, we were in some little town, and we were staying at a Holiday Inn. And we went to the bar after the show, after the TV taping, in the hotel. There might have been 10 people in the bar. Had one server.
And they'd done some shows, and Flair, this was back in WCW, I believe, or late in NWA before it transitioned. And Flair's like, "Oh man, it's 11 p.m. I'm not ready to go to bed, and I don't want to be alone. And we're gonna go to the bar." And Jim Ross is like, "Okay, we'll go to the fucking bar, Rick, whatever." And Ric Flair goes from buying drinks for him and Jim Ross to buying drinks for the entire bar.
That sounds about right, yeah.
He ordered 137 kamikazes. Couldn't be serious, could he? I mean, 137 kamikazes, there's 10 people here. Then he got the tray, and he was serving drinks and flirting with all the women.
Because, and it was dual purpose. On the one hand, and this isn't worth going into, short form in a podcast, but like Ric Flair was dealing with his own family abandonment issues. But the other thing was that Ric Flair was a character. And in wrestling at that time, to be a character, you had to be a character all the time.
You stayed in it.
So these men and women, but mostly men, would just completely lose themselves in their characters.
Next thing you know, he's on the bar and he's dancing and he's having a great time, and they're loving it because they're actually partying with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Can't we just go in and order a couple of drinks? You buy a round, I'll buy a round, and have a little conversation and call it a night, but it's got to turn into a party. But the more I got to know him, it was just that he needed companionship. He needed somebody with him, even if it was another guy, just to shoot the breeze, so he wouldn't be isolated.
And to a not insignificant extent, I think that is what Trump and Vince McMahon have done. There was just this thing about, and I can't remember, I think it was in the Washington Post, but it was a guy who interviewed Trump for like a Forbes richest 500 people or 50 people or what the fuck ever.
Yeah, it was like that kind of, like it was something like Trump kept saying that he had like 100 million or something, and only...
Yeah, so it's like 1982, and it's the inaugural one and everything like that. And this guy finds out that Trump isn't as rich as he says, and he gets a call from this guy named like John Barron.
Oh yeah,
who's like, "Oh no, Trump actually is that rich. I'm kind of connected to the family, and it really is his own money and not his father's and stuff like that." And he realized years later that wasn't John Barron. John Barron doesn't exist. That was Donald Trump calling him.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there's a reason why he named his son Barron, because that was his
alter ego.
Yeah, his alter ego.
Oh.
Jacob,
Yes.
you had a question?
I had a point, really, which is I just realized that the singularity is actually upon us, and the issue is that it's not computers that are going to overwhelm us. It's fiction. Fiction is the technology that's going to take us over.
Yes.
I love this.
Yes.
Vince and Trump and Pompeo has this whole ongoing thing about whether or not he was actually in a war. And I realize that since Black Mirror is never wrong, the Waldo moment is going to happen. And in the comics, Tony Stark was in the Department of Defense for a while. That's going to happen. We're just going to have Tony Stark in there.
We're going to have somebody that's lying. I mean, if you can have, like, what's-her-face sell the Department of Defense
we're going to have
non-usable...
Mark Zuckerberg will run for president, but he'll just have Jesse Eisenberg run for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the future.
Yeah, it's like...
Well, I'm even more pessimistic in that I don't think that it's just... I I don't think that it's just those people or powerful people or politicians or anything like that. I think it's us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm not the person that I am on Twitter. Right. I very carefully curate what I say when I say it. Every bit as much as any performance artist or anything like that, even though I'm a very mundane person on Twitter.
Right. And we've had performance artists on this show.
This is your comrade communicator coming to you live and on tape from my mother's basement.
Like within the last couple months, in fact. Anyway, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, and we all use nom de plumes. There is, of course, reams of research that everybody knows about that if you look at social media, particularly things like Facebook and Instagram, you get depressed because you see all your friends putting forth their best faces while you are simultaneously doing the same thing, but you also think that their lives are so much better than yours. But they're not. They're just curated. We're all
absolutely
fictional
curated.
now.
Yeah.
It's almost like a form of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, but it seems even worse than that, right? Because I have imposter syndrome.
I think all of us do. I think it's just a natural progression of being
anybody
in our cohort.
Anybody who does anything creative, or does work in the public feels that to a certain extent. I think that people really do feel miserable, and not in the imposter syndrome sense, but in the sense that
this world is designed to make you miserable. I mean,
what's that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this curated lifestyle is a response to the idea. I mean, we live in this capitalistic society that tells us that we can continue to buy our way into happiness, and we are not going to be able to do that. And so we continue to present this reality that's not real. And, I think, especially being a woman, I feel like this is almost more... And not to say that men have it less difficult, because you do have your own things, but like the idea of appearance and the idea of seeming like everything is fine, everything is okay, I need to maintain this, is so ingrained within our society that's where the depression comes from, because you look at somebody else and you go, oh, they seem to have it all together, and then you meet them again in real life. Like some of my friends, and I don't want to call anybody out here, but I will go to their houses and I'll be like, wow, your Facebook posts look really good, but you are a fucking mess.
She's talking about me.
Yeah. No, I explicitly said female friends for that reason, because I'm personally one of those people. I have a really great Instagram profile, but if you went to my room right now, you would cry. So.
Yeah. I think there's also a gap when you run into someone in real life that you know online, and I've certainly had this. I've had this happen where somebody has like read something that I've written, or been affected by an essay or something like that. I got this around something that I wrote in the Los Angeles Review of Books about being sick and engaging in entertainment as a means of just keeping your sanity, and they will act like weird around me, right? That I'm something that I'm not, and like I live a remarkably mundane, boring life. Yeah. And there's this dual, I don't know what to expect, and also feeling kind of let down. That you're kind of talking about, like you're going to meet me and you're going to see that I leave my socks on the floor. Yeah. And you're going to be kind of like, well, what the fuck, Well,
I also think that is one of the things that we have this. I'm kind of new to this idea of online popularity and networking and being around people in general. I'm a kind of a hermit and a antisocial person in general, but the whole idea that your heroes or the people that you respect and look up to are actually just normal human beings is actually one of those things that we should have learned a long fucking time ago. But we've had a lot of hero worship in our society in general. And we've elevated people to the point where we no longer see them as being human beings. We see them as being somehow superior to us. And in reality, for me, I just don't feel that that's a healthy way to deal with the rest of humanity. You have to treat them like they are human beings and they have needs and functions and they shit and they eat and they do all the things that we do. Lose that kind of idea, respect and love what they can do, but also just realize that they're human beings and that, we're all kind of in the same boat that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that there are limitless layers of corruptibility to all of that, and Yeah, it's just, but the idea that we can just invent ourselves and fool ourselves about what other people are seems to, at this point in the internet's lifespan, that seems to be the entire point of it.
It is.
And only ourselves. So it's kind of like the whole point is, it's like negative solidarity is built into the basic framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's that subject-object thing where we're kind of like making objects of ourselves,
Absolutely.
Because we are constantly projecting something to other people through this weird medium, and constantly curating ourselves, not for ourselves, but for other people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck posts anything on Twitter that's just for them? Who the fuck has 0 Twitter followers or hopes to always have 0 Twitter followers who's tweeting or posting on Facebook or whatever, right? That's just not for you.
Yeah. Well, I think the cat pics are both for me and for the viewing audience. So,
like that is as generous as it can be, right? Like the most generous, optimistic view of how we engage with social media and curating ourselves for the internet is that it's for me and someone else. It's never for just me. By definition, it can't be.
Right. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. Yeah. Otherwise, it would just. I guess we do have forms of solipsistic media, but it wouldn't exactly be social now, would it?
Yeah. Even if I'm posting something on Tumblr and it's only getting 5 likes, I'm still posting it to an audience. And it's bullshit, but at the same token, I feel sometimes I just think we do live kind of in a really strange time where we spend a lot more time online than in real person interactions. And so for some of us who are like that, it's like our alienation is so great that reaching out and actually starting to have these relationships online might be helpful for some of us that don't necessarily have the capacity to handle a lot of in-person kind of socialization.
That's actually an interesting point, and we can bring this back to a political thing of the people talking about, because leftist organizing is become like a thing for a lot more people but people are realizing is like the way that we use that people talk about like politics or even like a lot of lefty shit online. If you only went off of how people exchange online, you just be like, why the hell would I ever want to get involved with this in the first place? But if you actually go to something in real life and talk to folks, and it's replenishing, it's refreshing. It's kind of, it brings a source of joy. It's great to kind of meet up with comrades in real life and realize, hey, you are not you are not alone. There are other folks who are, who believe in this thing with you, and, together in real life and working on this shit, you can do something better.
Well, all that said, I think there are positive aspects to the technology. One of my closest friends is deaf, and I know a little bit of sign, and she's got one of those implant things, and she can kind of use that, although she's not a big fan. But I realized that we can both watch TV shows together with a website called Rabbit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really amazing to be able to have this media experience with her, which would be really tough to arrange otherwise. Yeah. And she can actually respond to what's happening and type out, oh shit, when there's a shocking betrayal. And it happens in real time. And, that's been a really big moment for us, being able to do that.
Yeah, it's absolutely a form of accessibility.
Yeah, and by all means, I am not like there are a lot of things that I'm pessimistic about the basic structure that we've created for internet interactions, but it's definitely not all bad. Twitter is kind of laden with that ironic, oh yeah, I really like this website, but it's slowly destroying my brain kind of thing, and that's true. Like there is a lot to like about it. There's a lot to like about me being able to talk to, my friends in California who moved away, who I miss, or my best friend who moved back to England. there's a lot to. I wouldn't have a job without the internet. There's accessibility. There's the fact that you have the entire catalog of human knowledge like at your fingers, so much so that you don't even think about using it, or worse, you just forget that it even can be used for that, right?
Right.
Like that's all fucking amazing. I just wish that it wasn't paired with this co-opted, monetized requirement to constantly invent a you that's not really you.
Yeah.
And that could never be you.
Yeah.
That's what bums me out about it.
I agree. I think it works along really well with the point that Jeremy made about going out and socializing with people and kind of having this moment where you are accepted. You know, like, I mean, if you're online, you're like, oh God, I'm gonna get called out for like my post I made 5 years ago. But in real life, that shit's never gonna happen. You're gonna be having a conversation with somebody and actually connecting with them in a human way, which we need more of as time goes on, because we are very slowly, not very slowly, we're very quickly being subsumed by this online thing. So.
I might tie this into your articles about superheroes, though, in as much as I grew up reading...
I know that they bother me.
Well, I grew up reading superhero comics. I'm obviously a devotee of the medium and the specific genre, and I agree with your critique, and this is something that you got into to a certain extent in your next article. It has more or less been dominated by two major corporate interests, and I think that's a real shame. I think superheroes are actually very essential to the world we live in now, because they are a rare form, at least potentially, of a story about power and what you do with power. Because narrative tends to favor the underdog, and if you are a walking tank, or you can... destroy a building with a few punches, these are stories that need to be told now. We are an incredible superpower in real life, in the world, and we have the ability as a country to do insane things, and I think it's important to have conversations about what that means. And I think it's a real shame that it comes down to them immediately coming up with these ideas about, well, what if this guy was actually the underdog again, and he had to punch a lot of people, which is just not that interesting.
So this is archetypal mythology for our age, and we're not telling those stories. We're telling stories about, well, what if he gets punched again, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, I'd offer a couple things. Well, one, I want to say that, like, even though I've never been like a huge fan of comics, I really, really like superheroes outside of comics. Like, I like superhero role-playing games and video games and stuff like that. So I'm completely not immune to the appeal. And in fact, one of my favorite role-playing games is kind of an arty game called Nobilis, which was a game. It was a diceless game. We played like gods.
Oh, neat! I haven't heard of that before.
It was not about what you could, like the limits of what you could do, but what you did with this more or less limitless power, right?
That's awesome.
And it was cool.
It sounds like a Peter Molyneux game almost, or something.
It was made by, and she changed her name. It was made by a professor from Georgetown named Rebecca Shawn Borgstrom, and it is this this like work of art. It's this coffee table sized book with like photos of Greek statues and stuff in it. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, so it's like that narrative I get. What I would offer as kind of a counter to the idea that we need these stories about what it is to be essentially an individual with power. And I'm putting the word individual in your mouth even though you didn't say it, because superheroes are necessarily stories about individuals, is that we don't need stories about individuals with power anymore. We need stories about groups with power.
Yes.
Because even if we localize the power of the ascendant capitalist right wing to a few individuals, it's still backed up with many times that number of people. They derive their power from our submissiveness, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the only way to combat that is with the power of many people who are no longer submissive and who are no longer willing to be exploited. So, again, that is not to say that the superhero stories aren't entertaining, that there's not a mythopoetic aspect to them which harks back to much older stories. But it is to say that whatever they have become now is not necessarily what they were 75 years ago, and they're not also necessarily what we need, especially in the movie-fied, 7 different X-Men titles world that we live in now.
Yeah. I don't disagree, but again, I think if you look at the current state of the Marvel Universe, for example, I mean, they all know each other, they all hang out, and one of the biggest events of the last 15 years was Civil War, which was basically about 2 groups of superheroes getting into a fight over legislation. I mean, they are acting more and more as a cohesive unit, so I think there are elements of that I think you could tell a lot of interesting stories, but because there are 2 corporations that basically have total control over what stories are getting told, you're not really seeing genuinely interesting concepts coming forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I ultimately, whatever I think of comic books is skewed at least a little bit by the idea that I can't, and I don't think anyone can or should, separate the way that they're created and who creates them from it. I'd be really interested to see a world where they're, whoever the 90s breakaway companies were, like, what was it, like Image, all the others. I don't know. Like honestly, I have these half-formed memories of, Spawn and the other non-Big 2 comics coming out. I'd be interested in seeing what would happen if 3 or 4 of them took like a really significant chunk of the comic book audience, right? So that instead of just having these 2 monoliths, you had these 5 or 6 smaller but still substantial companies, both competing to actually offer like more creative control and lasting benefits to the creators, as well as trying to one-up each other in terms of original stories that could be told. But we don't live in that universe.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because we're talking to you from Portland, where just a few miles south of where we are, Dark Horse is headquartered. Image moved up here. There's at least it's like, well, I think Portland really is has it actually become like the #1 city for like comic creators, or is it still kind of New York? Because I think, or is it just too disparate out of New York? I don't know.
I would say Portland's #1 for independent people. But...
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's boss, and that's, I hope they do more,
yeah.
Or at least as much as they can.
Yeah, but it's such a struggle because of the way that I can't speak to this as much as Jacob can, but I do know that it's difficult as an indie comic creator to get your work out there and also to make sure that it's distributed.
One of the things we usually do for a closing bit here is ask everybody if you have any recommendations or endorsements of stuff you've been digging on, or who have you been reading that are you really think others should be checking out, or stuff to recommend and to everybody else. Either you guys want to go first, or should I throw it to our guest?
I know what I've got.
Okay, Natasha?
Unless the guest wants to go first, that's always nice. Or do you want to think about it?
Thing.
Okay. Well, it's kind of relevant to what we were talking about earlier, but I have been watching Critical Role Season 2. I've never watched the first season because it's like 113 episodes that are 3 or 4 hours long. Because, of course, it's watching a group of friends play a role-playing game.
Hello, everyone. And welcome to tonight's episode of Critical Role, where a bunch of us nerdy-ass voice actors sit around and play the first game of our new campaign in Dungeons & Dragons.
gosh. Okay.
Actually, these both.
I'm going to use thaumaturgy, and I'm going to make all the windows in the place like open up really fast, like crash open.
Okay, you watch as 4 of the nearby windows slam open with a sudden burst of wind, and all the various bits of torchlight that light the deeper, kind of more shadowed corners of the room suddenly darken and flicker. The music suddenly comes to a stop. Everyone kind of holds their position and kind of glances over to the table where you're all sitting.
Jester, don't you remember us talking about keeping a low profile?
You're right, I'm sorry. I use thaumaturgy and I close all the windows.
They all slam shut a second time. The light flickers and then brightens back to its normal place. Everyone.
Ta-da!
Yeah! Yeah!
Come see me tonight at the carnival. I'm really good.
They're playing D&D 5e, and it's a Twitch stream every Thursday, which I cannot make because I have a D&D game then, but watching it on YouTube has been a really, really great experience, learning about how to play the game and also learning how people that are professional voice actors sound when they make voices well, and learning how to roleplay that way is really, really good. So I also got the chance to meet Matt Mercer, who's the GM, and Marisha Ray, who's a player, but also his wife, when I was in LA at WonderCon. That was so much fun. They were such good people. And yeah, anyway, that, and then I met, recently going to Chapo, I met my friend Rob, who does the DM of None podcast with his friend. And I really highly recommend that. Very short, 30 to 45 minutes episodes. But if you want to learn about how to play D&D, that's a good way to start. So I recommend that one. And yeah.
Awesome. Jacob, did you have anything, or?
I have been consuming content at an amazing pace. I have been watching every single superhero show. I have been playing video games for 4 hours a night. I am a machine. I have nothing to recommend. My life is hell. Everything I've been watching is terrible. Everything I've been playing is disappointing. And I
what
just
is your
want it to stop.
not recommend? What is your, like, I hate this. I would hate everything about it. I shouldn't. I will spontaneously combust if I have to watch it again.
Yep. I have been watching every single superhero or comic book TV show that comes out. The one that I have actually finally given up on is Krypton.
I didn't even know that was a show.
It is a prequel about Superman's grandfather living on Krypton before it blows up.
Jesus Christ.
It broke me. That is the show.
Is this all like CW stuff, or?
It's sci-fi, I think.
Oh dear.
Oh god.
But that's the one that got me.
Is it like very, very obviously made in Vancouver, or?
It's actually pretty good in terms of set design. It looks like an alien planet.
Oh, okay.
It borrows a lot from the Man of Steel series in terms of the visual aesthetic. And it's a good-looking show, but it's just so god-awfully boring. I just can't. So that would be my anti-recommendation.
I'll go for the thing I wanted to recommend was a book that I got off on sale from Haymarket Books up in Seattle last month. A book from Sharon Smith called Women in Socialism, Class, Race, and Capital. Fully revised and updated edition came out. I think it was the original version she had written back in about 2004. She revised and updated it and released this one about 2015 or so. It's a great overview of everything. Going back to, you have everything from like the history of several like just regular like normie feminist movements to like a lot of like 70s radical movements to even like there's the entire chapter up front about like of just getting into a lot of like Marx and Engels stuff about like Engels' book about the origin of the family and just kind of tying that in, like providing the theoretical basis that I think is great. And so it's a lot of it is an expansive book that it's one of the we always have guests who tell us that who suggest that we read more history than theory, and this is a great mix of that. So it's Women in Socialism, Class, Race, and Capital by Sharon Smith, out from Haymarket Books.
Very cool.
Okay, actually, I do have a recommendation now. Somebody just sent me a link to a Taylor Swift cover of Blank Space that's done by Cats, and I haven't actually listened to it yet, but I assume it's amazing, so I recommend everybody check that out.
Oh, God.
Link will be in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen, yes.
That should be our outro music.
Oh, dear.
I'm so sorry.
It is during the semester, so I do not pleasure read. I'd recommend Heidegger, which is most of the semester, but I don't know that I can actually recommend that. I do have some video game recommendations, though. I have been playing Deep Rock Galactic, and if anyone knows me, they know that I am obsessed with dwarves, like fantasy dwarves. And you play space dwarves, who it's kind of like a Left 4 Dead game. You and your buddies go into one of several different biomes deep under the earth of this planet. You have to mine X number of minerals. And the maps are procedurally generated, but really, really cool and fun. So it's different every time you play. They're really big, and you can get lost in the caves and stuff like that.
Awesome.
And you can mine anything. So it's kind of like Minecraft with Dwarf Fortress, with Left 4 Dead, with... I don't know. There's something else mixed in there. But anyway, that game is awesome. I've also picked back up the Elder Scrolls Online because I'm a big Elder Scrolls nerd.
Cool.
And I really, really like it. And... that game is in a good place.
I played the beta. I didn't play the actual game, but I really loved playing the beta.
Yeah, it's a much better game now.
Yeah.
There's essentially everything scales to your level, and it's pretty much the entire Elder Scrolls world. So if you like the Elder Scrolls world, if you like the aesthetics, if you like the history, or you like the idea of it, you can now just wander around in it at your leisure, at your pace, and just see everything.
Chim.
What is Chim? Oh, wait. Wait, no, what is Chim? What do you mean, Chim?
Sounds like somebody needs to reread their Vivek.
What?
Oh,
it's a lore thing.
Yes,
It's like
Chim is bad. I tried really, really hard to. They did a Morrowind expansion for Elder Scrolls, and it's set before. The actual Elder Scrolls world. Mm-hmm. And I tried really, really hard to figure out how to kill Vivek and never could. But that was upsetting.
There you go.
You tried.
Anything else? The only thing I've been playing is Stellaris and Far Cry 5. So,
Stellaris is in a really good place right now too, and that came out at roughly the same time as Hearts of Iron 4. And I was like, oh, Hearts of Iron 4 is clearly the better game, not because it's necessarily good, but because Stellaris kind of sucks, but Stellaris is good now. I like Stellaris. I've been playing Vermintide 2 as well, but basically any Warhammer game, I'll play it. So, but also Vermintide 2 is actually good.
All right.
Vermintide 2, I'm totally cutting you off because
go ahead.
Because Vermintide 2 is a game for everyone, even if you don't like Warhammer. So sincerely, go check out Vermintide 2.
Sweet. All right, and let's see. Okay, everybody, how can folks find you online? Yeah, even if you want to go first.
Oh, me first? Okay. You can find my column at Vice Sports every Tuesday. You can also follow me on Google+. I don't really post there very much, but you can find links to my role-playing game that I wrote and some other stuff.
Nice.
And you can always find me at Twitter at Brock_Toon.
Nice. You can find me, Nat, at Ashes for Foxes on Twitter. Also find us at Metamachina. That's my podcast, METAMASHINA. And we talk about monster fucking a lot.
Jacob?
I'm on Twitch almost every night now, at Jacob Mercy. Also Twitter, at Jacob Mercy. And I'm also on Facebook. If you have anything you want photoshopped, just let me know, because I'm really... that's another recommendation. I recommend Photoshop. I'm super into Photoshop right now. I love Photoshop.
If you want something to be photoshopped for you, just at Jacob Mercy on Twitter with your proposed shop.
And once again, please, the usual request for it, you can find the show on Twitter is Giving the Mic. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Giving the Mic. As always, because it always helps to ask, if you can, take a second and find us on iTunes and give us a rating and just a quick little... I wonder if I should actually institute a thing where every time we get a really good rating, we actually read it out and shout out people or something.
I think it's good. Rate and review, because that is the only way people get visibility, and I can speak for that personally now.
All right, and we even have a actually I just realized we even have a YouTube channel that I need to put more stuff on. And technically we have a Patreon, but I don't really put anything up on that. But if anybody feels like donating, patreon.com/givingthemic. Does anyone have any? Jacob's about to play a sound effect. Does anyone have any final words or closing thoughts to our expansive conversation this evening?
This was really fun, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much for staying up late. Okay, Jacob, you go ahead and play it.
You want to play us out?
Is that a cat? Is that...
It's all worth it. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you
for
so much.
tuning
I'm
in
so
again.
sorry.
Thank you for staying with us.
It is good, but
and yeah, like I said,
ridiculous.
share us with your friends if you want. Yeah, we need we can deal with the we could use the things. Anyway, thank you very much, Ian, for talking to us tonight and staying up late. We really appreciate it. Yeah, we went to a lot of fun places, and there's a lot more to talk about. And we'd like to have you on again at some point because
pick a favorite subject, make him listen to you talk about it, which is good. This is what I did.
Yeah,
I'll talk about Warhammer.
Yes.
So.
Oh boy.
Actually, if you could explain Warhammer lore to me, I will be there in a heartbeat.
Because
I have no fucking clue, but I follow a lot of Warhammer blogs on Tumblr, and their aesthetics are awesome.
Or well, just imagine just getting just all I'm gonna say is wait till you try like checking out some of the lore for 40K, and it's deeply I don't know. I never
Space Marines and Necromans.
All right, thank you everybody, and good night.
Have a good night.
Good night. Skype makes me crazy.
Same.
This is us, by the way. Hello.
Oh, hey. Do you want to do it video?
Not necessarily. Doubtful. I just wanted to do it just because I think I've never actually plugged this thing in.
Oh, okay. Let me know if you want to do it. I'm totally good with doing it video.
Yeah. Well, I figure usually we got everybody else here. There is Jacob, and there's Nat in the back.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm just staring at my phone, mindlessly looking through Twitter, like I do every day, all day. I don't know why.
That's fun.
Just lurk it.
Send me a tweet.
What do you want me to send you?
I don't know.
Let's turn that off.
Something cool.
Yeah, normally, that's the thing is
give me
usually
a dank meme, or give me something to Photoshop.
All right, I will.
All right, cool.
Okay. Listen, Nat, can you talk a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll talk right now. Talk. Talking like this. Yep. My brain's fried.
It's a good day for that. I'm trying to see if you're on channel 2 or channel 3.
I hate Mondays. That's not an appropriate joke. Don't record that.
Too late. There's nothing. We don't cut anything. Oh, actually, that's not true. We cut a lot.
Come on in, come to the place where fun never ends. You bet. Come on in. It's time to party with Garfield and friends.
I'm going to lower that just right there a little bit.
Jeremy's like, I'm just going to turn this off and then just keep it off for the rest of the show.
I remember watching Garfield and Friends and the weird Jim Davis's weird, like, I was raised on a farm, so I'm going to have myself a farm comic strip spin-off that'll run way too many years than it should have.
Wait, what?
You don't remember the magisterial glory that was U.S. Acres?
No. Thank Christ.
Not only was it
I watched the shit out of that. That was...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they had No. U.S. Acres was on because Garfield was never an after-school show. It was always a Saturday morning show.
The fact that you don't like U.S. Acres is the reason Trump won.
No. That would, laugh all you want. I'm waiting for that. That'll be an actual New York Times op-ed piece in 3 months or something.
Yeah, and I'm going to write it.
Oh, there you go. More
Garfield was good shit. I'm not gonna lie. I know that he's become kind of like meme-worthy and stuff like that. I remember the first time I encountered Garfield was I had this friend. I don't even remember his name. I just know that he had this big house out in the county. We were in Cub Scouts together or something like that, and this had to be a very narrow time frame because I was only in Cub Scouts for 6 months because I hated it. And I remember I went out to his house to hang out, and he had every single Garfield book. And this was 1986
That's
or
mine.
1987, something like that.
Right.
So there were already 30, and they were those weird rectangular books, right? And each one, which ones I'm talking about. They were not trade paper. They were long and rectangular.
Right. You got them in Scholastic Weekly Reader.
Right.
You put the order in every 2 months.
Yeah, and we just I don't know, we would just hang out. We only hung out 5 times or something like that, and but every single time all we did was just read these fucking Garfield books. It was very weird.
It's a nice bonding
And
experience.
I remember that I would force my younger brother to play the part of John, and I'd play Garfield, and I'd record us doing radio dramatizations of the Garfield comics.
It's almost like proto lasagna cat.
Yeah, no, it was bad because he couldn't read at that point because I got 5 years on him, and I would I don't have the tapes anymore, but you could hear me saying, "Hey Peter, you need to say, Garfield, where are you?" And he would do it, but he would take it really, really literally because there was one where this is dumb. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I stuttered and I said, "Say," but I meant to say yell. So I said, "Say, yell, Garfield, where are you?" And Peter goes, my brother goes, "Yell, Garfield, where are you?" And I was so furious because he ruined my
Okay,
radio
editing software.
Do you still have copies of that tape, and can we play them on the podcast?
God, no. I don't think I do. I think how many times do you move in 30 years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think I do. But if I ever find it, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not good.
No, but it's definitely nostalgic, I'm sure. That's got to be a good one to bring up for your family.
Yeah, find it and then encode it and then send it. Yeah, let David Roth and Jeb Ludden talk about it just for the hell of it.
Christ, no. I have too much respect for David to want him to lose respect for me, so I can't. There's no possible way.
You're talking about a guy who co-hosts a Hallmark Christmas movie podcast, review podcast. So,
I mean, fair enough, yeah. But I love David. David's legitimately one of my favorite people I've met in this weird media ecosystem that we inhabit in 2018. Just a legitimately wonderful, kind-hearted man.
Awesome. Do you guys ever read Deadspin?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
I mean,
He's yes, but he's one of the characters on there, and he got the podcasting bug because if you're of a certain age and you're online way too much, that's
just a natural progression of being online too much is you start a podcast because it's like a garage band for our age.
Wait, what do you show? Oh, okay. What is it? What's the title of this?
He's showing me Garfield Star Wars memes, which is slightly terrifying.
Me having access to a computer for a podcast is definitely a good idea. That's not going to have any negative repercussions whatsoever on the content.
Are you recording?